What are the million-dollar mistakes that I see being made in the housing market? One day, if that house becomes uninsurable or the insurance premiums are so high that the appetite for a buyer at that price point disappears, you're going to end up having to sell your house for a land value. Each neighborhood has a ceiling price. Some ceiling prices can be pushed. Some ceiling prices cannot. If you are looking at a home on a busy street, understand the fact that you're going to be running at least a 20% deficit. Land is the one thing they're not building any more of. If you don't choose wisely, you can't take advantage of those opportunities. What are the million-dollar mistakes that I see being made in the housing market? My name is David Siddons, and this is the second video in a series of how to lose $1 million. The first one that we did, the first video that we shot, was how to lose $1 million in the condo market, which seems surprisingly easy to do. And we sometimes think that because the housing market is more robust, more insulated, and in terms of supply and demand, far fewer homes available than condos, you would imagine that it's much harder to lose $1 million. With that said, it's not impossible, and it's actually easier than you might think. So although this video is about how to not lose $1 million in the housing market, it might be more apt to call it how to not take advantage of buying the right house where you can make $1 million or more. Many houses that I've sold to clients over the years have appreciated massively. At the same time, I've seen similar people buy homes and then reach a certain ceiling and it stops appreciating, or it just doesn't appreciate in the same way. Supply and demand economics rule supreme, and a lot of these rules and guides are there based around the simple laws of real estate economics. So without further ado, let's get into it. Point number one. This is probably the big elephant in the room. The insurance situation, the insurance conversation. And while most people seem to think that it revolves around the condo market, it most definitely has an impact on the housing market. Within Miami, there are a number of areas which are classified as flood zones. Now, if you accept the fact that if you're buying on the water and you've got a waterfront house, you're in the flood zone, you accept that, you buy a certain home, you have it raised up, it's to a certain height and a level, and you accept the insurance premiums that go with it. But those people who own houses that are not on the water, that are in a flood zone, and they are older homes, those are the ones that I really think probably are the houses that are at the biggest risk. What do we mean by this? There are houses right now through a number of neighborhoods in Miami where the homeowners have gone and renovated those houses. They fixed those homes up, they've then put them onto the market, and they're trying to sell them. And the problem that they found is that because their insurance premiums have gone up so much, they're being passed up by home buyers who are then finding a similar house, not in a flood zone, that they're actually going to choose over their house. And those houses that they've chosen have now appreciated almost 60% more than those houses that are in the flood zone area. Furthermore, those houses that may have been renovated beautifully, I might add, that are sitting at a lower elevation because they're older homes, maybe built before the year 2010 or even the year 2000. Those houses are fast becoming essentially a land trade. You can spend all the money in the world, but one day, if that house becomes uninsurable or the insurance premiums are so high that the appetite for a buyer at that price point disappears, you're going to end up having to sell your house for a land value. And that is one of the biggest risks that I see of how you can lose $1 million in the housing market. That's point number one. Point number two, buying the house on the wrong street. This is so obvious. Location, location, location. I can tell you that selling a home on a busy street in a family neighborhood, which is almost any neighborhood in Miami, because let's face it, the reason why families buy homes is because they have a space, they have the dynamic, and they work much better for a condo. So almost every home buyer, irrespective of where they're going, has some sense of family orientation. And families don't want to be on busy streets. They don't want their kids riding bikes on busy streets. They don't want to have to drive onto a busy street. They don't want the exposure of being on a busy street. So if you are looking at a home on a busy street, understand the fact that you're going to be running at least a 20% deficit on a quiet street. So where do I see people losing money? Well, on those busy streets, once you get onto those areas where there's a lot of traffic, you are simply going to put a ceiling on the appreciation of your home. It will get to a certain point, but it won't go above that. And when that happens, you're going to hit that ceiling while your neighboring homes all around you on other quiet streets just keeps going up and up in value. My third point, and this is very important, it's the zoning of homes. How can you lose $1 million in zoning? Well, quite simply, you have to understand that lot size, land is the one thing they're not building any more of. And often I'll see buyers go out there and say, well, you know what? I can't afford much, so I'm going to go for a 6,500 or a 7,000 square foot lot. There is a ceiling to those homes. If I reflect back over the last 20 years and I look at the homes that were built on, let's say, a 15 or a 20,000 square foot lot, as opposed to those built on a 7, the appreciation of those 15 to 20,000 square foot lot homes is much, much higher. And systematically, it's so important to make sure that you consider this in your next purchase. The house might be beautiful. It might be manicured beyond belief. It might be just a great, beautifully built home. But on a small lot, you've got a limitation. Now, if you're on a small lot and you're in a single level home, I have many conversations with home buyers who think about, oh, maybe I'll tear the roof off my house and I'll build a second level. Yeah, you can do that, but you're also going to destroy a lot of the value inside the house. And that's a point where I would tell a home buyer, it's not time to renovate, it's time to sell up and move on. This brings me to my fourth point. Really understanding the dollar per square foot in the neighborhood. There will be a ceiling for your type of product. And if you've hit that ceiling, you have to understand that anything beyond that is going to be an advancement in the market, and it's much slower than it is in other parts of the market. So once you hit a certain quadrant and the values are held, and that's often because of the geography, sometimes because of the school systems and other variables, maybe busy streets, junctions, where you get kind of what I call a cutoff point, you have to understand that you can only take a home so far. And the work goes in the other direction as well. There are areas where you have a very, very, very high ceiling. It is the classic case of don't buy the most expensive house in the neighborhood. If you can afford to get into a neighborhood and be the worst house on the street, do that. It might be a little bit more uncomfortable. It may not feel as ideal, but I can tell you that over the years, if you look at the values in neighborhoods like Old Cutler Bay, Gables Estates, and you compare it to other areas where houses maybe were at the time a little bit less. If you were to get a slightly nicer home in a worse area, or you had the option of getting a worse home in a better area, that worse home in that better area, in that gated community, in that quadrant, today has appreciated significantly. Let me just show you the value increases for neighborhoods like Gables Estates. Look at the chart here of how the values went up for this neighborhood. Now compare it to the houses outside of Gables Estates in the general areas of Coral Gables staying east of US 1. They also increased. But look at how much the Gables Estates homes went up. And more than just the blended averages, look at the ceiling in those markets. The ceilings in those markets went up so much that those individuals who now own those neighborhoods are sitting on such a valuable piece of real estate. And think again, 20 years from now, what that would look like. You can't build another Gables Estates. You can't build another Old Cutler Bay. You can't build another Cocoa Plum. These little quadrants will keep moving. So if given the opportunity, find that special neighborhood and pay the difference, because the spread, the delta that you're going to see 20 years from now is going to be way more significant. The next point I'm going to bring to is what I call architecturally compromised floor plans. There's a certain point, and this is probably where I see some real bad spend going on. Buyers will go into a neighborhood and they'll buy a big home. They'll say, I need a big house. I'm going to do a renovation on it, but it's got a very compromised floor plan. And they'll say, you know what? I'm going to add to the house. And they end building up wings and extensions onto these homes. And what happens is that you end up with a Frankenstein's monster. You take a house from 3,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet, and your kitchen stays the same size, your master stays the same size, your living room might even stay the same size, but you end up with a lot more bedrooms, and then the flow stops working. And so you end up with just a very poor floor plan, where I've seen houses where you have to go through to the master bedroom to get through to the swimming pool. I've seen areas where you walk into the house and you're met by a wall and you have to kind of maze your way through to the kitchen and the family room. Floor plans matter. They matter in condos, they matter in houses. And it's so important to make sure that when you're going to get into a process of buying a home and you're thinking about renovating it, you've got to think how it's going to flow in the long run. You might be adding to it because you need an extra office or you need the extra bedrooms for the kids, and you say, well, we'll make it work. But making it work is only so good. And eventually what will happen is you'll end up with a house that no one will want. So what I would say to you is understand the limitations of your architecture. Understand how far you can push it. Because there's a point when you really should exit out of that house and buy something better, buy something that flows better. Low ceilings. There are a lot of houses that have these low ceilings, and that's when I get into the conversation with home buyers who decide to renovate and spend a lot of money on houses that will always, no matter how nice your finishes get, buyers will not pay you your top dollar per square foot if you have a compromised floor plan or compromised architecture. They will simply go out and buy a newer home with a better floor plan. Maybe it's a little smaller, but they will not spend all the money in the world just because you decided to put really nice marble countertops in the kitchen. If your ceiling is low, the rest of the house is compromised, you're going to anchor your appreciation. The house is not going to go up in the same way. So make sure you understand the floor plans. This is what I call the silent killer. Chopped up 90s, 80s homes, low ceilings, poor light. These are the things that matter. And that goes on with other houses where I had a conversation with Danny Sabali at Buildcore, and we talk about building homes. When builders build the wrong type of house. If you're going to build a home, make sure it functions right. The amount of houses that I've seen that have 3 bedrooms upstairs and then 3 bedrooms downstairs. I can tell you this. Buyers long-term don't want that. They want bedrooms on the same floor. They want 4 or 5 bedrooms on the same floor and maybe one downstairs. Think about how the house is distributed, not just for you, but for people in the future, because one day you will come to sell that house. And if it's just working for you and only you, you're going to have a major problem. And that brings me to my next point. The cheap becomes expensive on finish. If you go out and you have a great house with a great floor plan, but you choose to do cheap finishes in a prime neighborhood, in a really good neighborhood, you're going to have a really hard time selling it. The buying market's changing, and people will not compromise for cheap materials. Cheap materials, cheap architecture, bad schematics. Those days are gone when people are rushing in to just pay any amount of money for a house. Make sure you get it right, because it's worth spending a little bit more on the right millwork. It's worth spending a little bit more on the right doors. It does make a huge difference. And when you come to sell that home, you have to believe that the buyers out there are looking for a much better home, a much higher level of quality than we've previously seen in the city. So it's important to understand that. Don't be one of those individuals that's dying 5 feet before the shoreline because you decide to cheap out at the last moment. It will come back and bite you in the ass. And this is especially true for those who are building homes to sell. So my next point about how to lose $1 million is externalities that you can't trade away. What do we mean by that? Okay, so high tension power lines, airport flight paths, commercial adjacencies, late night noise, the substantial hum of traffic going past if you're on a street backing up behind you. There's a lot of these external factors that you need to really consider. So when you're actually going out into buying a house, go to the house at morning, noon, and evening. I can't tell you the number of home sellers who have come to me with a house that has a lot of ambient noise caused by busy streets. And they've said to me, please, David, only show this house between 10 o'clock and 11:30 in the morning. Don't show it at between 3 and 5, because the noise from the cars going by from schools is so much that you're going to end up not being able to sell the house. Or other variables where they'll give me a reason, don't show at this certain time because the flight path from Miami International Airport goes straight over our backyard and everyone's going to hear the planes. When you go to buy a house, we take you in the morning, in the lunchtime, and in the evening. Not just because of that, but also because of the light. Light has a factor. Houses light up and feel very different at different times of day. And if you choose the wrong house and it gets dark, you're going to feel it. It matters. Aspect matters. It's one of the reasons why we talk about using the right architect, having the right person to design the house so you do get the right amount of light flowing into the property. It's very, very important. My next point is respect the boundaries and the zoning within the neighborhood. What do I mean by the boundaries and the zoning? I will tell you that each neighborhood has a ceiling price. Some ceiling prices can be pushed. Some ceiling prices cannot. There's a certain point where if you're west of US 1 and you have a home in Coral Gables, there's a ceiling to the values of your home. East of US 1, the ceiling goes much, much higher. Proximity to schools matters. The reason why west of US 1 is so much cheaper than east of US 1 and when it comes to Coral Gables is the time it takes you to get to school in the morning is suddenly halved. It's so important to know where schools are around you. Might not be important to you, but the next buyer it might be. So really be aware of the school zones and how long it takes you to drive to school, and time it and test it, because that's very, very important. Understand zoning, trees, and the FEMA 50% rule. This is something that my wife taught me, and it was incredible to understand that there is a ridiculous number of agents out there in the market who've sold houses to individuals looking to take an older home on the water. They go to renovate it and they say, this is great, I'm going to buy this. And I've seen it with $11, $12 million homes where they bought the house and they said, I'm going to fix this house up. I'm going to do a beautiful renovation. And the neighboring houses, which were all selling around $20, $25 million, I can compete with them. It doesn't work like that. If you are going to try to renovate an old structure, an old home on the water, if you are going to spend more than 50% of the actual structural cost, so the land might be worth $8 million. In this case, this working example of a $12 million house, the land was worth, I want to say 8 to 10, and the house was worth 2. Guess what happened? That meant that FEMA would only allow them to spend $1 million on renovating that house. $1 million doesn't go very far when you're trying to renovate a luxury waterfront house. And they said, no, you've got to tear this house down. And then they realized that this wasn't going to take them 6 months and they were going to have a fix and flip situation. This was going to take them 3 years. They had to bulldoze the old house. They had to understand that the zoning laws had changed and they couldn't build the size of the home that they wanted to. And they had to offload the house. And they spent months and months and months going down this route only to discover that they couldn't do what they wanted to do. And simply because their agent didn't know, they didn't do the research, they didn't understand the FEMA laws. The same goes for zoning and trees. Understanding the trees on your lot, understanding what you can do. There are setback laws. There's setbacks for the front of the house. There's setbacks for the side of the house. If you buy a house on a lot and you have a number of large oak trees and one's going straight through the center of your lot, you have a choice. You have several choices. Number 1, don't buy that lot. Number 2, buy that lot, remove the tree and have to replant some other trees. Or number 3, do what some builders, and I've seen them do it, which is they've miraculously removed that tree from one way or another. The tree got sick and died. Boo-hoo. And here's the thing, then you get caught. Then your construction costs go up. Then they stop you for 6 months. Know the laws around the trees. Coconut Grove is very, very strict. Coral Gables is far more lenient. Pinecrest is lenient. Pinecrest will let you build on around 50% of your lot. Coral Gables will let you build on 45% of your lot. And Coconut Grove will let you build on 80% of your lot. All these neighborhoods have different zoning laws, so it's really important to understand that. It also is good to understand then if you're in one of the homes that may not be something that you're going to rebuild or redo, you can understand what might happen around you. It always amazes me when people buy a home and they suddenly say to me, oh my goodness, there's suddenly all these houses in the street that are being built around me. And I usually say, well, that's probably a good thing for you. But yes, it might be inconvenient, and maybe that's not what you want. But you've got to understand that certain neighborhoods are going to have more construction than others. One of my final points I'm going to talk about is septic and sewer. You know, the hidden costs. Understand, again, when you're going into building, if you're on main sewer or septic. Most of the houses in Miami are actually on septic tanks. They're not on sewer. A few busy streets will be on sewer, but most are on septic. And when you have that situation, you've got to allow for the septic tank and the drain field site, which means that there's a portion of your land that you might think you might be able to put a swimming pool on, or you might be able to put a barbecue area on, or a pergola, only to discover that you cannot build on top of that because that's where your septic tank is and that's where your drain field site is. So understand that. Understand, again, where the power lines are, and understand what it costs you when you start getting into, let's say, renovations, where many people will discover that the number of plumbing lines, of course, as you would imagine, influences the size of the septic tank and the drain field site that you're going to need to have. I've seen individuals get into a position where they've had to dig up their swimming pool to expand their septic tank. And it can really change the variables. So do your research before, or better yet, hire someone who actually really understands what's important and what has to be adhered to in that particular neighborhood. And lastly, I'm going to say this. The David Siddons Group has 15 territory managers. They eat, sleep, breathe, and live in the neighborhoods that sell. And each of my territory managers understands not just the zoning laws, not just the FEMA laws. They understand what the dollar per square foots in that markets are at and where they're going. We have predictive modeling tools that we're now working with to see where our market's heading. We have a lot of historical data, and we will tell you certain neighborhoods will only go so much up in value, and then they might hit a ceiling. Others, the sky is the limit. So consult with us. Let me connect you with my experts. I hope that this video detailing how to lose $1 million in the housing market, although maybe not as salacious and juicy as that of the condo market, where you can really lose your shirt. There are still some very real dangers that exist in the housing market, but most importantly, there are huge opportunities. And if you don't choose wisely, you can't take advantage of those opportunities. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please, for more information, see my information below. And I look forward to another video where we'll educate you on all the respective markets across Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach. Thanks for watching.